Hey guys, Jeff O'Connor. Welcome back to my shop. Hand plane basics. That's what we're here to do today. So if you've never used a hand plane, you're getting into it, stick around. Okay guys, so a hand plane in your shop is one of those indispensable tools if you've got one. But there's a couple things that make it really, really valuable in your shop. And if you're not doing either one of those things, you can have some problems. So the two things are, one, you've got to know how to sharpen your blade, and you've got to have a razor sharp blade. Otherwise, it's going to be very frustrating for you. Secondly, you've got to know how to set the plane up so that you can get a really nice shaving. There's plenty of people, I'm one of those people myself, that bought a plane years ago and never really learned how to use it, never really got good at sharpening it, and it sat in a drawer because it frustrated me so much. So if this interests you, you want to start using hand planes, stick around here, guys, because we're going to talk about some stuff here. We're going to do some sharpening, and I'm going to show you some technique. First off, though, let's kind of go over the hand plane and just show you what these things are. So a hand plane, the base of the hand plane is almost like a shoe with some of the terminology. So in the back of the hand plane, we have what's called the heel. In the front of the hand plane, we have what's called the toe. And then on the bottom here, we've got the sole of the hand plane. On top, we've got our front knob, which I actually don't use as much as some people do. I'll show you the way I utilize the front of the plane here. The back is not called the back handle. This is actually called the tote, where your hand goes. The two most important things for your adjustments while you're doing hand planing are your depth adjustment right here at the bottom, this star-shaped thing. Now on most hand planes, when you get them new, they're going to have an adjuster kind of like this. But this is actually a Rob Cosman upgrade. This is called an adjust star, which is really cool. It's very easy to adjust the blade. So by turning this counterclockwise or clockwise, you're going to either push the blade forward or you're going to retract it with this. The second thing you're going to use on your plane quite a bit is your lateral adjustment lever. You can see it right behind the blade there. You're going to be pushing this right or left to adjust that blade as you're making a cut, and that's going to help you get a full width cut across the board, and you'll see that later on when we do that. Now, in the center here, we've got, this is our lever cap. So to take that off, because we're going to get ready to sharpen this blade, we just lift up this little handle here, and you got the lever cap screw there. So we'll set the lever cap off to the side. Now we're going to take this piece out. Now, on this piece, we've got two items. We've got your chip breaker, which is the small section here, and then we've got your plane iron. This is your blade itself. Now, back in the old days, hand plane blades, if you guys have old Stanley planes that belonged to your grandpa and so forth, if you look at the blades, they were really, really thin stock. And this is pretty thick, actually. Most hand plane blades nowadays are pretty thick. So the chip breaker has kind of lost a little bit of its initial intentions from years ago, because this was meant to stiffen up those really thin blades. However, we still do utilize it, and I'll show you how we set it up with the blade after we get done sharpening it. But what we're going to do is unscrew this, and this is a special screwdriver that Lee Nielsen makes for this type of screw. We're just going to slide this off. So now we've got the chip breaker, and we've got the plane iron here. Now for today, since we're just getting started into sharpening and basic technique, we're not going to talk a whole lot about the frog right now. But this is a good look at that lateral adjustment lever I was telling you guys about that goes back and forth to adjust that blade. So we'll get more on this later. But for right now, let's go do some sharpening. Okay guys, I'm here at my sharpening station. The first thing you're going to notice is that my sharpening station is pretty low to the ground. The reason I do that is I do what's called freehand sharpening. I don't use any jigs to do my sharpening. Freehand sharpening allows you to sharpen quickly and get right back to work. So I think it's a critical skill that everybody should learn. The reason it's low is by freehand sharpening, I'm locking my arms out as I sharpen, and that keeps, I'm almost like my own jig. I kind of keep myself at the right angle while I'm getting my secondary and tertiary bevels put on this blade here. So when I sharpen, I use Rob Cosman's method. So if you want to check out Rob Cosman's video, I think it's called 32 Seconds to Sharp. He'll show you this exact process. But I use a 1000 grit stone, and then this is a 16,000 grit stone, which is what he prefers to use, and it works great for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a lubricant on my stone here. This is a diamond stone. This has what's called honerite in it, and honerite keeps your stone from corroding, so it's mixed with the water in there. Now what I'm going to do is I lock my hands on my blade, and I bring the blade up until I can feel where that primary bevel is. Once I feel where that primary bevel is, I come off that bevel slightly, a couple degrees, and now with my arms locked, I'm going to do a little circles here for about 10 seconds. Now, it's that angle and it's the locking of the arms that keeps you in a good position to do that sharpening. So the next thing I'm going to do is go from my 1,000 grit up to my 16,000 grit. This time, I'm going to do what's called tertiary bevel. So as you're noticing, I'm never sharpening the primary bevel. I don't sharpen that at all. The only time I'll ever sharpen my primary bevel is if the secondary and tertiary get worn down over time, or if I get a chip or something goes wrong with the blade and I got to kind of regrind everything, I will then. But for this, I don't use that. So we've done a secondary bevel on the 1,000 grit. Now we're going to add a little more water. We'll come on the 16,000. Now I'm doing exactly what I did the first time. I'm coming up on the primary bevel, but now I'm going to go up twice. I go up once, then a second time. This is my tertiary bevel now. My arms are locked, and about 10 seconds. And here I add a little bit of pressure to each corner of the blade, just do a little feathering on there as well. Okay. And now the last thing we do is called the ruler trick here, where we put this little elevation on the end of the stone. I flip it over now to take that little burr off the back here. I'm going to rub that on there and keep right at the end of the stone here. About 10 seconds on that. And we're all set. So without all my talking, you know, you're just like Rob says, you're 32 seconds and you're good to go. Back to work. So we're going to take this blade back over to the work table. We're going to reassemble it. I'm going to show you some tricks of getting it reassembled well, and we'll do some technique. All right, we're back at the table now. We're going to reassemble our plane iron with our chip breaker, and then we're going to set it in this plane here. I'm going to show you a couple things here. So as I put this back together, the important thing, and something that I've done, I know a lot of people have done, the blade has to go past the chip breaker. If the blade does not go past the chip breaker, it's not going to cut. And I've made the mistake, and I know other people have made the mistake as well, I'm sure, where you accidentally put the chip breaker ahead of the blade and put it in there, and then you're going to have problems cutting. So it's always important to remember which one is your plane iron. It's that long one there. So now the plane iron, when I set it in the chip breaker here, you can probably see just a little bit there. You see a little glimmer of light. And that's about a 32nd of an inch. It doesn't take much. Can you see that? You're not cutting with the entire blade. You're just using a very little portion of that. So not very much has to protrude past that chip breaker. So I'd say between a 1/16 to a 32nd of an inch. But you guys can let me know what works well for you. That's kind of the distance that works well for me. After I've got that, I make sure this is nice and level on both sides here, even I should say. Retighten that. And now the blade end is going to go in this way. So the chip breaker will be sitting on top. Slide that in there. Next, we're going to put our lever back on. Slide that down, clip it down. Now, the next step is to adjust this so that we're going to be able to make a nice cut on this cherry across. So one of the things we need to do is there's a blade. You can see the blade right here. And we have to make sure that that blade is parallel to the sole. And what I mean by that is I'm looking down here at my blade. And this gap need to be even. It can't be canted because I'm going to have a bad cut. So I'm looking down here right now and I can see it's straight, it's nice and even across. So my blade is parallel to the sole. Next thing I'm going to do is get a little wax. Hang on one second, let me go in the drawer and get some wax here. Okay, got some wax out of my drawer here. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of wax on the sole, and that helps the friction as the sole goes across the wood. So now I've got my blade is parallel to the sole. I got a little wax on there. Now I want to retract the blade so that I don't feel any cutting yet on this piece of wood. So I got a piece of cherry here. This is a really cool little jig. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but I highly recommend it if you do a lot of planing. It's just a long strip of hardwood and another piece of hardwood with a screw. It's a very, very simple jig, but you put this piece into your vise, and then you can either clamp this or use a dog to hold it, and you can plane right against that. It's a really neat, really cheap, neat way to hold your wood, and you can flip it. You know, it's quick acting. It's good to have in the shop. Anyway, back to what we're doing. So here, as I come across, I feel like I'm engaging the wood here. And I don't want to do that just yet. So I'm going to retract my blade until I'm not on any wood. Now you can see, if you can bring the camera up this way, as I go across the wood, come over all the way to the top. As I go across the wood, you can see my blade's not engaging any wood right now. It's just sliding right across. That's where I want to start. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my depth adjuster, the little adjustar that Rob Cosma makes, and I'm just going to spin it as I push until I start to see a shaving come up. Okay, now I can start to feel it. So watch here on this left side as I push. You can see it starting to come up there. So you can see it's on the left side of the blade. So now that's where our lateral adjustment lever comes into play. Since it's coming up on the left side, I'm going to push this lever just a little bit to the left and see if we can change that shaving. Okay, a little bit more. See, it's getting wider. We're going to keep adjusting it. It's getting wider. See that? Probably one more. Okay, that might be a full shaving. Let's start from the back here. Okay, that's a full shaving there. So now the blade is adjusted to where it needs to be. The one thing I want to show to conclude the video is the actual technique that I'm using. When you're using a hand plane, you want to make sure that you're able to keep the sole flat on the wood that you're planing, because this is your reference area. So if you saw where my thumb was, I was taught this by Rob Cosman during his course. I don't use the knob in the front. I actually put my thumb right here. And that actually really helps to keep the wood and the sole in nice flat contact together. This doesn't feel as intimate. This really gives me a lot of control. And I am able to use my fingers below as kind of a fence as I come along the wood here. So my thumb goes here, and that's my primary means of holding that plane nice and steady. My backhand, I grip it with 3 fingers and 1 finger is hanging out on the outside. I don't push down very much with this handle at all. I'm more pushing this way with it. And I'm not death gripping it. If your knuckles are white as you're planing, you're holding it way too tight. You're really just pushing this across the wood. So as I get in position here, I'm just going to kind of open my hand. I got good pressure with my thumb, and just open my hand here and just kind of push it along. And you can see I'm not really doing a whole lot other than this forward pressure with my hand. So really, to grip it really tight doesn't really matter. It almost is counterproductive for you when you're trying to do this, because you're just trying to propel this blade forward. And you can see you get a nice little shaving out of it. So I hope this course, this mini course, has helped you guys. I plan on doing some more plane videos. There's a lot to learn about this, but I tell you, once you know what you're doing, you can sharpen that blade, and you know how to use it, you're going to always reach for it, because not only is it effective in the shop, it's a joy to use. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Take care.